Hey guys, in this video I'm going to demonstrate the water Photoshop action. So the way the action works is that you trace around your subject, you fill it in with a color, you run the action, and this is what the water action will create for you. By default it creates a underwater look, but you can see here that it also applies a water effect to your subject, and you can actually reveal the areas that you only want to be in water. So you can see the top half of his body here is in water, his shins here in water, and the rest of his clothes are just normal. Okay, you can also position these splashes where you want, and you can also change the direction of the light source. So I'll show you how all that works. But there's also a few other things you can do. By turning off a few layers, you can basically just remove the underwater look so that all you're left with is the splashes and the drops. Okay, and then I'm going to show you how to use the content aware fill so you can continue this background behind our subject. So you can see here the background has continued through, so that way if you want to use the water effect, that it's completely transparent. So if I go back to the original photo, you can see there is no background details behind him, and in here it's continued through. So I'll show you how to use the content aware fill to quickly achieve that. Now in the second part of the tutorial I'll work with this photo. Okay, I'll run through the motions again and I'll recreate this. I'll change the light direction. But you can also see on this guy how his lower half is completely water, and as you go up here some of his original colour starts to come through. So I'll show you how to do all that, and then I'm going to run through that process again of using the content aware fill. So it's a bit more obvious here. You can see down on his legs here how the stones have repeated through, and this this floor here, you can see it's run through his feet. Okay, so I'll show you that, and in the last example I'm going to show you how to use masking so that you can basically create a blend between the underwater look, and that'll fade off into your original photo. Okay, now before jumping into Photoshop, I'll show you a couple more examples. Alright, let's jump into Photoshop. Alright, so there's a few things we need to go through to make sure your file is all set up correctly and the action runs smoothly for you. So firstly, look into your layer panel when you've opened up your photo. Click on this top right hand corner icon, go down to panel options, right down the bottom here, make sure add copy to copy layers and groups is ticked. Click OK. I'm just going to drag this back. Next, go to image mode, make sure you're working in RGB color mode and 8 bits of channel is selected. Next, go to image size, just check the size of your photo. Make sure you're always working with a high resolution photo, you're always going to get better results. So you can see the size of mine there. Okay. Next, what I need to do is load up the brushes that were included in the download. So if you just hit B or activate the brush tool over here, right click anywhere over your photo, that will bring up the brushes panel. So what you need to do here is either load the actions into your existing stack of brushes or replace them. So you click on this icon and you need to go to load brushes or replace. I'm just going to replace these because I don't need any of those. Replace, and I'm just going to select the water brushes.abr file. Okay, so there are the water brushes. Now when you've loaded up the brushes, hit B again, make sure it's active. Make sure your brush opacity is at 100%. Always make sure the brush opacity is at 100% before you run the action. Next, make sure that this icon here is unchecked. Okay, if that is ticked, if that is checked, then you're going to get a lot of errors in the action. So make sure that is not checked. Okay. So next, what I need to do is create a new layer, and on that layer we're going to trace around our subject and fill it with a color. So I'm just going to go to layer, new layer. Now this must be called brush, all in lowercase letters, no spaces. You'll get an immediate error if this step is not done correctly. So brush, click OK. So I'm just going to select my background layer for a second because I need to make a selection around my subject. So I'm going to hit W, that will activate the magic wand tool over here, and I'm just going to click around my subject and hold down shift to increase that selection. Okay, you can see it's cut into him a bit, so I'll have to fix that up. Alright, I'm just going to zoom out. Now, you need to have your brush layer active when you fill in your subject. Okay, so currently if I fill in this selection, if I hold down Alt backspace or Option backspace, that will fill a selection with the foreground color here, which is red. You can fill your subject any color, it doesn't matter. So if I do that, you'll see that it's filled everywhere apart from my subject. So I'm just going to undo that. Control or Command Z. I need to invert this selection. Control Shift I or Command Shift I. Now I'm going to fill that selection again. Alt backspace or Option backspace. Okay. So it's done an okay job. It's obviously missed some areas. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to zoom in a bit. I'm going to hit L, and that'll activate the lasso tool here. But if you click on this icon here and go down to the bottom, magnetic lasso tool, I'm going to use that. I'm just going to trace around the edges here, just any area where it hasn't really done a great job. Through here. Okay, I'm just going to fill that and just fix this little bit up here. Okay, zoom in here. Maybe fix up his foot. Okay, that'll do for this example. You can obviously spend a lot more time making a much better selection around your subject. Or if you don't want to use the magic wand tool and the lasso tool, you can always just brush onto this layer. So hit B and right click and use the soft brush that I've included here. You can just brush onto this layer as well. Okay. So I've got that done. What I need to do now is load up the action. So if you go to Window, Actions, you'll see the Actions panel pops up to the side here. Let's create a bit more room. So we need to load the action now. So if you go to this top right hand corner icon, click on that. Go down to Load Actions. Select Water by Sevenstyles.atn. Double click there, and it will pop up here. Alright, so when you've loaded up the action, you'll see there's a folder here called Water by Sevenstyles. When that's twirled open, you've got a series of different actions here. Alright, so the bottom two you don't need to touch. I've got in brackets there, don't touch, just as a reminder. The light rays action you use after the water effect has finished playing back. So that's after you've played the action. So these are the three that you're interested in playing first. Now the difference between these three, you've got splash set 1, 2 and 3, is that when the action's playing back, it's going to pause and it's going to allow you to position 10 different water splashes around your subject. Now the difference between these three is that there's a unique set of 10 in each one. So this one will have a set of 10, a set of 10, and a different set of 10. Okay, so before we play the action, I'm just going to double check everything again. So I'll hit B, check my brush opacity, that's 100%, make sure that's turned off. Okay, brush is spelled correctly, no spaces, no uppercase letters, subject's all filled in, that's all ready to go. So all we need to do now is click play on the action. Now when I press play, there's going to be a few pop-up windows, and it's going to help guide you through to the end of the action. Alright, so I'm going to click play, and in a few moments there is going to be a pop-up window which allows us to position our splashes. So here it is here. It says in the next step you get to place 10 different water splash graphics around your subject. A bounding box will appear around each individual splash, allowing you to freely move, scale, rotate it where you want. After you have positioned the first splash, hit enter on the keyboard to move on to the next splash. And I've given just 2 tips here. Tip number 1, after the action is complete, each splash graphic is on its own layer, allowing you to make additional changes to it. So don't feel you need to get the position, rotation, scale 100% correct in this next step. Tip 2, if you would like to use a different combination of splashes, run a different action, just like what I said before, so run either one of these. Click continue below to proceed. So when you get this pop-up window, just click continue, And in a few moments, what will happen is you'll get this box appear. I'm just going to zoom in a bit. You'll get this box appear around a splash, okay? And you'll notice that the action stopped, and it's waiting for you to position the splash. So there it is there. This is the first splash, and you can drag this around wherever you want. You can grab these handles here as well to scale that down or up. And if you move your mouse outside of the bounding box, you'll see you get these arrows. It's allowing you to rotate it, so you can rotate it where you want. So, you know, and like I said in that little tip window, you don't need to get the position of this 100% right, because I put each splash on its own layer after the action's complete, so you can jump into that onto that layer and move them around again. So when you've positioned it, hit enter, and it will move on to the next splash. Okay, so there it is, and I'm going to move this one, say there, hit enter. Move this one down there. There. And if there's a splash that you're not sure what to do with for the moment, what I like to do is, I'll, for example, use it on this one, just scale it down, right, and just hide it behind your subject for the moment. Okay, you can always access that splash again when the action's finished. Might move this one up here. And if you want to get an idea of what splash it's up to, if you look to the right in the layer panel, you'll see it's up to W8. Okay, that's basically telling you we're up to number 8. So you can see 7, 6, 5. So I've got 2 more to go after this. So I'll hit enter again. So there's number 9. This one, let's put there. And I'll hit enter there. Alright, so that's all the 10 splashes created, so the action is then going to move on. So I'll just speed the video up a bit to get to the next window that pops up. Alright, so the next window that shows up, it says, in the next window, use the angle setting to adjust the direction of your light source. I've got 2 tips here again. Experiment with the options in the style drop down menu. Tip 2, experiment with the scale percentage amount. Click continue below to proceed. So when this window shows up, just click continue, and you'll get this gradient fill window here. And so what you want to play around with here is the angle. And you'll notice when I adjust this angle, the light source changes. Alright, so this is where you can experiment with the light source, and again, you can change this when the action is finished. It's just to help you guide through to a result that you're happy with by default. Okay. Other things you can play around with here is the scale. So as you drag that up or down, you can see the gradient here compresses. Alright, so by default it was at 120. In style here, you can experiment with different looks. So you got radial. So if you want a light that sort of emits from the center, you can use that. Another good one is reflected. Okay, so you can see that there. Alright, and if you want to play around with the gradient, click on this graphic here, and that'll bring up the gradient editor. So to the left here is the darker point of the gradient, to the right is the lighter point. So if it's too bright through the middle, what I could do is just double click on that box there and just darken this color up a bit so you can see it's not as strong. But I'm just going to cancel that, and we're going to stick to linear for the moment. Go back to 120. So when you're done there, just click OK, and it'll move on to the next window, next pop-up message, and it says, in the next window, use the brightness slider to adjust the shadow darkness throughout your subject. click continue below to proceed. So just click continue here, and you'll get this brightness contrast window. So all you need to do here is play around with this slider. So you'll notice when I drag it to the left, it will increase the detail of the shadows, it'll make them darker. But if you go to the right here, you can create a completely transparent look to your subject. Okay? Or you can go the opposite direction, so it'll brighten up the dark areas of your shadow, of your subject. So I'm just going to keep this somewhere around here. Okay, again, you can adjust this after the action's finished. Click OK. Now the action, there'll be one more pop-up window, and that will allow us to change, to add the light rays. So it says in the next window, move the blur center to where you want the light rays to emit from. Tip number 1, try matching the light ray direction to your light source direction for better results. Tip number 2, if you decide you want to change the light rays direction, I'll explain to you how to do this step after the action is complete. Tip 3, to increase the visibility of the light rays, adjust its layer opacity. I'll show you how to do that. Click continue. So click continue here, and what you want to do, you won't see anything for the moment, but what you want to move around is this, the blur center. So this is the light rays. So if I wanted the light rays to go, so I'm looking at my design here, the light's kind of coming from this top left hand corner. So I would move my light rays up into that top left hand corner. If the light was coming from the bottom right hand corner, I'd move this down here. So just position this to match your light source, okay? And also take a look at your subject, the lighting, the original lighting on your subject. So you can see quite a lot of light hitting this area of him here and up here, so it would make sense for the light source to be coming from this direction. So I'm going to move that there, I'm going to click OK, and then in a few moments the action will complete. Okay, the action's all finished playing back, so I'm going to collapse the actions panel, and I'm just going to create a bit more room here. Alright, so the first thing I recommend that everyone does is to collapse all the folders that are left open after the action's finished playing back. So to do that, you just hold down Control, Alt or Command Option, and you click on this folder arrow, release the keys and reopen the folder again, then everything is collapsed. So if you wanted to run the action again, or say you wanted to try a different splash set, delete the water folder. Okay, I've left the brush layer on at the top here, so that's all ready to go. Then you just select a different splash set and click play. Okay, but for now, let's go inside the water folder, and I'll talk to you about what all these layers and folders do. So the first layer that I like to jump to is this one here. It's called Overlay Original Photo Color. So if I turn this off, all you're left with is the water effect applied over your entire subject. So if you turn it on, it overlays the original color. Okay, but where you want to be creative here is brushing on the areas that you want to turn into water. So to do that, you use the mask. Okay, so currently the mask is white, meaning that it's going to show this layer, but anywhere that's black on the layer mask will hide it. So if I hit Control or Command I to invert this mask, that will flip it to black, so now it's all hidden. So I'll flip it to white, it's all visible. So what I like to do, if you hit B, okay, there should already be a soft brush selected, but you can select this one here, okay, and if you make sure black is your active color, so if you hit X, that'll flip it between black and white. So I'll make sure black is my active color, because I want to hide some of this original color. So I'll start brushing here. I can actually now turn this area into, we'll give it the complete water effect, okay, and this little bit down here on his leg, I can paint there as well. Alright, so that's just a good way of controlling what areas of your photo you want to turn into water. So this layer here, reveal original photo, I've got in brackets here brush mask. So if I hide this mask for the moment, if I hold down Shift and click on it, that will disable it. All it is it's a cutout of your original photo, and it's put above all the other layers. So if you start brushing white onto this layer to reveal it, all it's going to do is start revealing your original photo. Okay? So obviously not going to work too well because this is an underwater effect, but then when we move on to the next part of this tutorial of where we take away that underwater effect and we overlay the splashes on the original subject. This is where this layer can come in handy. So this layer here, reveal photo details. This is similar to the layer above. I'm just going to turn this off. So this layer here, if you start brushing white, okay, it will reveal details, but it will only reveal them in black and white. Whereas this one here actually overlays the original colors. This one just reveals details. So let's say for a moment that I only want a bit more detail around his face. So I'll brush white there. I'll brush black to remove this area. Okay, so now when I turn this on and off, you can see that we've got a bit more detail there. Alright, so I'll turn this one back on. So we've got the pants there, and we've got a bit more detail on his face. I can lower the opacity down here if that's too strong. Something like that. Okay, so the layer below is called color adjustments. This is where you can just make some subtle changes to the color. So if you double click on this, you can see that I've made a few little changes here to the blue tones, so you can excuse me, you can adjust that. You can also target the shadows, and midtones and highlights. So playing with that one. This layer here, contrast brightness adjustments. So if I turn this off, you'll see this has quite a strong effect on the design. If you turn it off, everything's quite flat. Turn it back on, adds a lot of detail, brings in a lot of detail into a subject, a lot of contrast. If you double click on this layer, there's a few things you can play around with if you want to. Okay, so just adjust those settings and see if you prefer any of those changes. This one is similar to the layer above. This just focuses on contrast. Okay, so I've got in brackets here opacity. So I'm just reminding you to play around with the opacity of this layer. So currently it's at 30%. If I drag it to 0, and I'll start dragging it to the right, you can see the contrast increase. Okay, so by default that's at 30. Zoom out. Okay, so this layer here, subject shadow detail. So just for the moment, I'm going to turn off these two, and I'm going to jump inside this folder. So we've got this layer here. If you double click on this, this is the brightness and contrast adjustment window, and this is the one that popped up during the action playback, where you adjusted the brightness and that sort of targeted the darker tones of your photo. Okay, and you can adjust the brightness of that. So this is where this layer is. So if you wanted a real transparent look to your photo, you could pretty much set this brightness to 0. Okay, you can go in the opposite direction, that will brighten it up a bit. Okay, but let's say we'll leave it there. Let's say, for example, that actually let's exaggerate this a bit more. Let's say, for example, I want all these dark tones to appear in the upper half of my subject, and I don't want it to appear over the pants anywhere. What you don't want to do here is you don't want to use this layer mask to brush onto. If I go inside this layer mask by holding down Alt or Option and clicking on it, okay, you can see that I've restricted this layer to only appear in these white areas. So if I start brushing black to hide that, then go back inside the mask, you see I've pretty much destroyed that color map. You want to keep that intact. So where you want to brush is actually on this folder mask here. So I don't want any of this darker detail to appear on the pants. So I'm just going to select the mask, hit B, make sure black is my active color, and I'm just going to brush that away. Okay. So now when I adjust this, it will only be affecting the top half of my subject. Okay, because that's where I've restricted it to appear through the mask there. Alright? But I'm just going to reset that, and I want to turn these layers back on. Okay. So next is the subject visibility. So if I turn this folder off, okay, what's keeping this visibility around are these two layers at the top here. Okay, so if I turn this back on now, this subject visibility folder is pretty much all of the water effect. Okay, and then you've got these other layers here, which where you can adjust the appearance of things. So if you go inside here, there's a few layers. Firstly, we've got this one here called Subject Contour Brightness. So if you double click on this, okay, there's a few handles you can play around with here. So let's grab this one here, and if I drag this one to the right, you can see that it is darkening up everything. If we drag it to the left, it brightens up everything. So yeah, we want to play around with that. Okay, and you want to play around with this one here. See if I drag it to the left, and then it gets quite dark. Drag it to the right. Okay, and again, you can focus where you want your adjustments to appear through the layer mask. This layer here, subject visibility, I've got in brackets opacity. If I drag this to 0, and I start dragging it slowly to the right, you see the award effect comes on. So by default, I've got it at 50%. Okay, but sometimes you might want to use it a little bit lower, a little bit higher. Okay, this layer here you can just leave. I've just given that a few dashes, just because it's not really a layer that you need to experiment with. Okay, so here is the drops folder. If you turn that off, you see that. So if you go inside here, I'll explain to you how this is set up. It's pretty simple. Got a different set of drops on different layers, so I can move that around. See those drops 5. Okay, and above each one of those drops layers is a brightness controller. So you can double click on these and play around with these curves here. So where's I'll just get rid of that one for the moment. So if you look here on these two here as I drag this handle around, so you can change the brightness of all the bubbles here just by adding different anchor points to this curve and playing around. That's the same setup with all of these. Okay. So if you wanted a lot more drops, what you could do is select the drops folder, hit Control or Command J. Okay. So what that'll firstly do, by duplicating the folder, it will increase the visibility of all those bubbles. So I'll undo and redo that so you can see that. Alright. But when you've duplicated the folder and you go inside it, what you want to do, I'll just zoom out a bit, Control or Command T, and then you can rotate them, you can scale them up. You want to rotate them a fair way around so it doesn't look like you've just duplicated the folder. Okay, so that's if you want more bubbles. So Control or Command 0 to fit the design canvas. So say, let's say for example that some bubbles that have appeared that you don't really want, what you do, select a mask, hit B, make sure black's your active color because that is going to hide everything that's in that mask, in that folder. So let's say I didn't want this one here, I just brush that away. Okay, that's simple. Or you could target them individually through their mask. Okay, so here is the splashes folder. If I turn it on and off, see that? So if you don't want any splashes at all, just turn the folder off. But if you go inside here, similar setup to the drops folder is that you've got your splashes on individual layers, okay, all 10 of them, down there, and above it, you've got the brightness controller. So you can see, if you want to quickly identify which splash is which, just turn the visibility for that layer on and off. Okay, so let's just take a look at this one here for the moment. So yeah, you're free to move this around. Control or Command T, that'll allow you to rotate it, scale it. I'll just undo that, so I like it, that position there. And again, you've got the brightness controller. Alright, so if you want the splash to be a lot darker, drag this down, drag this down. Okay, undo that. But you'll also notice on each one of the splash layers is a mask. If I go inside this mask, you'll see I've restricted to not appear in that black area. Okay, and that black area, it's prohibiting the splashes from cutting too far into your subject. So if I move this one around, you'll see that it starts to intersect a little bit through his head, but then it disappears. Okay, so yeah, the splashes do cross a little bit into your subject. But what I like to do, well, firstly, again, you're free to brush white onto this mask to reveal more of the splash cutting into your subject. You're free to do that. what I might do, I might quickly jump back into the subject visibility folder. I might lower this down to about 40%. Is this a bit too bright? No, 50%. Okay. Alright, so I jump back inside here. Now what I like to do quickly after the action's finished is I go down here and I hold down shift on these masks, and what that will do, it will quickly preview that splash completely cutting through your subject. And what I like to do is just go down here, hold down shift, then I just ask myself, does that look better cutting through my subject? That one looks good, so I'm going to keep that. And I'll go down, hold down shift, click on these masks, that looks good. That looks good. I might just move that maybe there. That looks good. No. That looks good. That looks good. And I'll keep that as it is. Okay. Now, another little tip to quickly affect the overall brightness of all the splashes in the folder is to create an adjustment layer down here. Go to levels, hold down Control Alt G or Command Option G, and what that will do, it will clip it so that this adjustment layer only affects this folder below. So if you double click now on this levels adjustment layer, and if I drag this handle to the right, you'll see that is affecting the overall brightness of the splashes. Okay. Alright, so this layer here, noise, I've just created this layer to help reduce the banding a bit from the gradient that's created. When you're working with gradients, a lot of the time in Photoshop you can create banding, so adding a little bit of noise just helps reduce that. Okay. So here is the light rays layer, so if I turn that on and off, you can see that there. Again, I've got in brackets the opacity, alright, so by default it's pretty low, 20%. If I hit 5 on the keyboard, that'll boost that to 50%, which is probably a bit too strong. Or what you could do is, boost it up and control that visibility through the mask. So let's say that I don't want this to be so strong. I'll hit B, and make sure black is my active color. To change the brush size, you use the left and right square brackets. So I'm going to just brush a big spot here. And what you can also do is, when you've brushed a big spot, let's say I want a little bit of that visibility to come back, you could double click on the mask and lower this density handling. So you can see if I bring it to 0, 100, so you can bring that a little bit back in. And I might just lower this overall, about 20. Now something else I like to do, I'll just quickly create, is I usually like to increase the light intensity around here. So what I'll do is just select the top layer here, create a new layer, Control Shift N or Command Shift N. Okay. Set the blend mode of this layer to overlay. Zoom out, Control or Command minus. Hit B. Make sure white is your active color, and if you just brush white here, that'll just create a nice sort of hot spot, which looks nice. So keep that. Okay, and if you want to increase the brightness, let's say I wanted this area to be much more white, I can create another layer, set the blend mode to screen, zoom out again, and I'll just brush a bit of white there. Alright, so that's looking good. So let's go back down here. So we've got this layer here, lighting. Okay, so if you double click on this, this is the gradient fill window that popped up while the action was playing. So you can play around with the angle here, okay? But one thing you'll notice though is that when you're adjusting the angle, the light rays aren't changing direction with it. It's because we actually need to run, you need to run the add light rays action if you're changing the light direction. It's very simple. So let's just hide this for a second. So let's say I want to change the light direction to this side, okay? I'm going to click OK, and what you want to do is select the light rays layer and delete it. Now select the add light rays action, click play. Okay, you'll get that pop up again about the blur center. Just click continue or hit enter, and what you want to do is just move that to your new light source. Click OK, give it a few seconds, and then you've got the new light rays. Alright, so let's say you wanted a radial light and the light rays to emit from the center. What you could do, double click on this lighting and change the style to radial, play around with the scale here. Alright, so got that. So now let's play the light rays action again. And I'm going to leave the blur center in the middle, click OK. Alright, now all the light rays come from the middle, and you could mask out, let's hit B, you could mask out a bit there, lower the overall opacity, say maybe 10%, right, and so that creates a nice look just like that. But let's reset all this. Let's go back to linear and go there. We'll run the light rays action again, put the light up there. Okay, I'm turning these layers back on, and I might lower this down, try 15%. Alright, so, and then you've got this layer here, background color. Pretty simple, you just double click on it and choose a new color. Okay? Alright, so that covers all the layers. One little thing I might just do here is select the splashes mask, and I'm just going to brush away this little bit here because it was bothering me. Alright, so there we go. There, check out the before and after. There's the original photo. There is our underwater effect. So what we're going to do now is work to create this. So we're just going to remove the excuse me, the underwater look, so that the splashes and the drops just fall back down onto our original photo. Alright, so how do we do that? It's pretty simple. So let's start off. All you need to do is hide the lighting and the background color layer. Alright, you might want to hide the light rays as well and the noise, so just turn off all those. But then you'll notice when you've hidden, I'll just hide these as well. When you've hidden those layers, it's very contrasted. It's because these two layers here are giving it all the contrast. You only really want to keep those two contrast layers on when you're using the underwater look, because if I turn those off, okay, and it's quite flat, you turn it on, and it looks much nicer. So when you turn those off as well. And then look what you got. You got all the effects now falling down onto your original photo, and you notice that your original photo is still giving this sort of wet look. So if I turn this off, okay, if you look around his face and shoulders and arms here, and I'll turn this back on, you'll see you get this nice gloss effect run throughout your subject, and that is coming from the subject visibility. So if I turn that on and off, you can see that there. So again, you can jump inside here and mess around with these handles here. If you want to boost the intensity of that gloss, you can turn that up. Okay. So yeah, just remember to turn off these layers down the bottom here. I mean, you can leave the light rays layer on if you want. You see that'll just add a nice little line effect. So keep that on. It's still some banding from your original background. You could leave the noise layer on. Okay, it's up to you. Yeah, very important to remember to turn these contrast layers off, okay? And you know, if you wanted to use your own background, a different background, you could just import your background and put it down the bottom here, or you know, you could create a solid color background down the bottom here, all right? Or I mean, you could just turn on the background color layer here, all right? And you can change the color here if you want. Okay, so you can use any color you want. Okay, so the next part of this tutorial is that I'm going to show you how to use Photoshop's content aware fill so that we can extend our original background to cut through our subject. Okay, so you'll notice on our original photo, the background stops at the edges of our subject. Okay. So that's where the content aware filter is really handy, is it does a good job of trying to continue that background through the subject area. So I'll show you how that works. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is just hide the water folder for the moment. Select your background layer, hit Control or Command J to duplicate it. Alright, so we're going to copy. So what we want to do is now hold down Control or Command and click on the brush layer. So what that'll do, it'll just create a selection around our subject. Now make sure your background copy layer is selected and then hit delete. So what that'll do, I'll deselect that now. If I hide the background layer, all we've done is punched a hole in the shape of our subject into our background. So what we need Photoshop to do now is to try and fill in that hole with this background detail. Okay, so the way to do that is that let's select our brush layer again, Control or Command, click on it. What we want to do is expand this selection out a little bit. So if you go to Select, Modify, Expand, let's expand that, say 50 pixels, and what that'll do, that will increase the selection. So now Photoshop can try sample areas between the gap and the edges of our selection, and it'll try and repeat that through and try and fill in our subject. Now to fill it using the content aware fill, you hold down Shift Backspace, okay, and you get up this fill window. From contents, make sure content aware is selected and then click OK. And if you just give it a few seconds, it will try and fill in that gap. Alright, so there you go. So you see it's done an okay job. There wasn't much detail for Photoshop to work with, so it's done its best as it can. But what we want to do now is just try and fix this up a bit. So what I'm thinking I could do here is just blur that out, okay? So if I just go to, I'll keep the selection active because I want to blur that area. So if I go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and yeah, use a pretty high radius like that. So that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. But if I click OK, then hit Control or Command D to deselect, you'll see that I've still got traces of our selection edge. So I'm going to hold down Control Alt Z and Control Alt Z again to undo. But this time what I want to do is feather this selection so we don't have hard edges, we've got soft edges. So go to Select, Modify, Feather, and we'll give it 100 radius. Okay. Now if we go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur again, hit OK, Control Command D, deselect. You'll see we no longer have excuse me, hard edges. It's all looking pretty good. And what I could also do here is create a new layer. Control Shift N or Command Shift N. I could sample this color here by hitting I. Click to sample a color, hit B, grab the brush tool out, and I'll just change the opacity of my brush to 50% by hitting 5. I could just brush some of that color around like that. Okay, so there is our background done. I'll just merge these two layers together. Shift select them, hit Control or Command E to merge down. So now let's turn on the water folder. Okay, and what you'll notice is that the background has now passed through our subject. So let's check out before. So before, if I turn that off, okay, it's falling down onto our original photo. That's why our subject is completely visible. But now with a new background, alright, we can now really experiment with these layers here. So I can turn those two off, you know, and now we've got a complete water effect sitting on top of our original background. So we go inside these folders, you know, play around, hide that mask, play around with our shadow detail here, play around the contrast here as well, okay. And here you could experiment with more with brushing on your original photo. So if you want what you can do here is just brush on the original look of the pants here. I'm just doing this quick, but you could obviously spend a lot more time doing this. But, oops. Okay. Or what you could do is if I hit Control or Command I to invert that, that will basically invert it so that our any that we didn't brush is now our normal photo. So maybe you want, let's say you want the pants, his clothes to just be water. So what I might want to do is just turn that off, okay, and I might actually turn off the shadow detail, and you know I could brush this away, like that. Okay. But I think I prefer just like this. And what you could also do here, if you wanted to add a bit more realism into the pants, a bit more of the original look of the pants, just you know, firstly define the area like I've done here, and you know, just only use a little bit of opacity. So I'll bring it down to 0 and I'll slowly drag it to the right. You see, you start to bring on a bit more of the original look of the pants. But I really prefer just this look that I've got going so far. So I'll just keep that. Turn this mask back on. Turn this back on. Okay, so that is looking pretty good. So one more thing I might do here before moving on to the next example is just applying some overall sharpening to this design. Okay, I think adding a little bit of sharpening will help bring out the drops and the water splashes a lot more. So what I like to do here is just select the water folder and hit Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E, and what that'll do, it'll put everything everything that's visible onto one layer. So if I start moving this layer around, you can see there's our entire design on one layer. So what you want to do from here is go to Filter, Other, High Pass, and I like to set this radius to 2, and you can see just this really subtle outline of all the details. Click OK. And then set the blend mode of this layer to Vivid Light. Alright, so now when I turn this layer on and off, you should be able to clearly see much more clarity in all those splashes and drops. Alright, and if you don't need to use it at 100%, if the sharpening is too strong for you, just hit 5 on the keyboard, that'll take the 50%. But for this example, I think around 80% looks good. So let's run with that. And if you want to make some, what I like to do to experiment a bit more with colors, if you want, is firstly you can play around with this color adjustments layer, or the one I like to use is go down the bottom here and hit selective color, change this to neutrals, and you can play around with the toning a bit here as well. Alright, and I also like to jump into the blacks, so you can sort of color the darker tones of your image. Alright, so let's check out the before and after. I'll just put, how am I going to do this? Let's put this into this folder. If you want to move a layer up and down like this using the shortcut keys, it's Control or Command left and right square bracket. So Control right square bracket will move it up, Control left square bracket down. So I've just moved that new background into my water folder, so I can just turn off the water folder here. So let's zoom out. There's our before, there's our after. Alright, pretty cool. So in the next example, I'm going to use this photo here, going to go through the motions and recreate this, and then I'm going to use the content aware filter again to fill in our the details behind our subject. So you can see the stones here have repeated through his legs, the ground here is repeated through. So I'll show you that again. Alright, so let me just get that all set up. Alright, so I've got the next example open here, and I've just traced around my subject. I've filled him in with a colour. So if I hide that, there is the original photo. Okay, there's the brush layer. I'm just going to hit B to check the opacity of my brush. Okay, it's at 50%, so if it's at 50%, the splashes are going to come on at 50% opacity and all the bubbles. So that's why I always want that at 100%. That's all good to go. I'm going to tool open the actions here, and this time I'm going to run the splash set 2. I'm going to click play and just wait a few seconds until we can position those splashes. Okay, I know what all this means now, so I'm just going to click OK, or you can just hit enter on that. And what I like to do as well with these splashes is that you can see the shape of this splash here. I try and match it with the shape or the edges of your subject. So this fits well around the shield. Hit enter. I'm looking at that there. I'm looking at it could fit around his shoulder pretty nicely. there. Got 3 more to go. I'm gonna put that there. Want this somewhere around the axe. I think that'll do there. One there. This is the last one. Scale that down. Right, that'll do. Hit enter, and I'll just wait for the next set of pop-up windows. Okay, I'll click, hit enter. Now I want to change this slight direction over this way because I'm just looking at the light direction of the subject. So you can see the light is hitting his shoulder. So let's try and match it a bit. Click OK, and this will just give you a preview, you know, of the shadow detail. That'll do, and I'll just wait for the light rays pop-up window. Hit enter, and let's move these rays here. Right, and there we go. So I'll hide this. Control Alt or Command Option on this forward arrow. Release the keys. Reopen the folder. Everything's collapsed. So let's take a look at what we're trying to do here. So here's the photo. So you can see here we've got this blend where it goes from water, and you can see the colours start to come back on. So let's try and achieve that. So let's jump to the original photo color layer. Now what I like to do here is sometimes use gradients because it just creates smoother blends. So if you hit G, that'll activate the gradient tool. Alright, hit X so that makes sure you're using black and white. So let's go from black to white. So if I just hold down Shift while dragging this out, that'll create a, whoops, I have to select the mask. Make sure the mask is selected. Drag that up. So you can see now, if I go inside that mask, so black is going to hide the layer, white is going to reveal it. So I'm just going to keep something like that. Alright, so now if we go down to the subject shadow detail, I can play around with this. Now I'm not taking any notice of this top half because I'm going to mask that out. I'm just looking at his legs. So that looks pretty cool. I like how it's a bit brighter here on his leg. It looks like the light's really passing through it. So let's lock that in. Okay. Now I'm going to select the folder mask here. I'm going to brush, make sure black is my color. I'm going to brush those details away from here. Alright, looking pretty cool. There's quite a lot of drops here. Let's have a look. Might just turn that one off. Or again, you can use the mask. So if you brush onto this main folder mask here, it drops. So I'll grab my black brush, start brushing away. You can basically just hide any drops that you want. But if you want to just focus on individual drops, use the mask on those layers. So I'm just going to use the main folder here and just. Actually, no, I won't. I'll just hide this one here. There's a few too many. Okay. That is looking pretty cool. I'm going to jump inside the subject visibility here and just, even though I'm happy with that, I always like to just jump in and play around with these handles because you never know if adjusting something could look better. So I'm just going to increase that a bit. And again, the same thing. You can see how adjusting this is affecting this upper half as well. So you can use the mask on this levels adjustment layer there to mask that out. Okay, look, I'm pretty happy with this. I don't want to. Actually, no. What I might quickly check is go inside the splash folder and do that method of holding down Shift to preview the splashes cutting through. So you can see that there. So that looks pretty cool. Just a few extra drops running through his body there. See down here on his leg. So I hold down Shift. So I'm going to hide that. That doesn't look great. That doesn't look great. That looks pretty good. No. Yes. No. Yeah, I'll keep that. And no, it won't keep that. Alright. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the light source, the brightness here. Again, create a new layer at the top. Control Shift N or Command Shift N. Set the blend mode to overlay. Make sure white is your active color. X, and zoom out. B, activate the brush tool, and I'm going to brush that on there. Let's have a look. Looking pretty good. Looking pretty similar. Let's now sharpen this. I'm pretty happy with that. So Control Shift Alt E or Command Shift Option E. Filter, other high pass. So that's the vivid light. Alright, and there we go. So I'm just going to group all this. So here's the before, here's the after. So now I'm just going to delete that sharpening layer. Now we're going to again use the content aware fill and repeat that background across so that we can have our transparent subject. So let's run through that process again. Let's hide the water folder for the moment. Duplicate our background layer. Okay. Now hold down Control or Command, click on the brush layer so we've got a selection of our subject. Delete, so we'll punch the hole in that background we've just duplicated. So let's create that selection again. I'll just hide this for a moment. Okay. So Control or Command, click on that. Now we want to expand that selection. Select, modify, expand. Let's just go 50 pixels again. You can experiment with bigger numbers. Or another method here you could do, I'm just going to cancel that, is just hit L. Okay. Make sure you got the lasso tool here. And you can just draw around your subject like that. Okay. But I'm just going to keep it, just use the expand method for the moment. Select, modify, expand, shift to backspace, and select content aware. Click OK, and we'll see how good of a job Photoshop does here. Alright, so there we go. Control D or Command D to deselect, and you see it's done a pretty good job. Not perfect, obviously. So you could obviously spend time going in here and trying to match this as close as you can, but you'll see that when I turn this water folder back on, we need to hide our layers again. So let's hide these contrast layers, let's hide our background layers, and there we go. I'm going to hide the light rays, don't need that, and it is that simple. So now you can see, that's why it doesn't really need to be perfect. You can see the details running through his legs there, and we're pretty much, I'm just going to check, pretty much done here. It's done a really good job. If you want to, so you can see here as I turn it off, sorry, on and off, you can see the details. If you watch around his shin here as I turn this on and off, the background changes a little bit. So what you do is select the layer that we duplicated, put a mask on it, click on this icon here, and you could just hit B, make sure black is our active color, and just sort of brush away around the edges here. Okay. Most of the time it'll be really subtle, so I don't really need to do this, but you can if you want. Okay, so let's move on to the last example, which is going to be this. Okay, here's the original photo. I'm going to create this. So we're going to use masks to create a blend between the underwater look down to our original subject. And you can see some of the water gloss is still running through down on his legs. Alright, so let me just get that all set up. Alright, so I've just finished running the action on this photo. So I'm just going to collapse everything here. And I'll show you the original. There's the original photo. There's my brush layer, and that was my result. Okay, so we're trying to match this here. So I've got the light source coming from the top. So I've done that. What I might do firstly is just increase the intensity of these light rays. I'm going to create this extra bit of light source at the top here. Just like that. That will do. Okay, I'm just going to mask out a little bit of this light ray. Alright, so what we're going to do first is, you can see here we've got pretty much a smooth transition, so we're going to use the gradient technique of masking things away. So the first thing I'm going to do is group these four together. So shift select these, I'm going to hit Control or Command G. That will group them, okay? I'll just call this BG background. So if I turn that off, it hides everything. So, hides everything. So we've just got those contrast layers affecting that. So that is just that technique there of, you know, just getting splashes to show through on your subject. But what I want to do is turn those back on, and I'm going to turn the background layer back on. I'm going to create a mask on this background folder. Now I'm going to hit G, activate the gradient tool again, and I'm just going to drag up like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, so what you can see is that these contrast layers, if I turn them both off, okay, so I've got the original look down here which looks fine, but then it's sort of, even though I think this looks pretty good, it looks much better with the contrast applied to it. So what we can do here excuse me, is just select the mask that we've just created on the background folder, and if you hold down Alt or Option and click and drag that mask up to another mask, that will replace it. So all I've done there is I've copied that same mask onto that layer, and I want to do it again to this layer. So what that's done, it's restricted these contrast layers to only appear in this white area. Okay, so that is the first part done. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. Now I just want to apply that same mask to the splashes here. So I'm going to drag that down to the splashes folder. So you see now the splashes gradually come on in opacity. Alright, so that's looking good. So now I'm going to jump inside this the shadow detail layer. I'm going to play around with this bit. Just going to mask it away. Excuse me. Black, sorry. What I might also do, so you can see this here is overlaying the original colour. Alright, so I want to mask some of that away. Maybe I don't want any up here. Like that. But maybe I want a little bit of detail still on his face. Okay, let me check this out again. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to apply the same mask to the drops. Okay, I might duplicate the drops folder. That will just boost the intensity. Actually, what I could probably do here is hit Control or Command E. That merges all the drops onto one layer. Set the blend mode to luminosity. So all, if I zoom in a bit here, you'll see that a bit better. Undo that. So you can see the drops, the bubbles there. You can see how it's quite not matching, the colours not quite right. If you send that to luminosity, that will just blend better with the background colour. Okay. Now, another thing I forgot to mention is that a quick way to adjust the brightness of all of the splashes in one go is that you create a levels adjustment layer. Okay. Now, if you hit Control Alt G or Command Option G, that will clip it so that this levels adjustment layer only affects this folder below. Alright, so you can double click on that and then you can drag these handles around. You can see that's changing the brightness of the splashes. Okay, I'm going to quickly go inside here and hold down Shift. Alright, that's looking good. Now, what I want to experiment with is, I'm going to use that content aware fill technique again. So I'm going to duplicate the background, Control or Command, make a selection, punch a hole in that background, select, modify, expand, Shift backspace, fill that content aware fill, click OK. Alright, deselect, and that's done a pretty good job, so I'm going to turn this back on. Alright, now if I hide the original, so now you can see that we've got the water effect. So now what you can essentially do is just lower the opacity here, and so you get a lot more of that water effect coming through, but the idea here is to have the original photo blending upwards into the water effect, so I don't want that to. Well, what we could do is just lower that down. I'll invert the mask of the reveal original photo, so that all we've got is the original photo. But now, what I'm going to do is, actually I'll invert that back and I'll hit G, gradient tool, and we'll just drag a little gradient down here so we get the original photo. Actually, I might just use the brush tool, it's probably easier. The absolute original photo here. Okay, and I'll just lower the opacity down a bit, blending up into the water effect, which looks pretty cool. Alright, one other thing I might do, I might add a brighter spot at the top here. So I'll create a new layer, I'll set this to screen, hit B, make sure white is my active colour, and I'll zoom out, just create a little spot there, so we've got a bit of a hot spot. And let's compare that. Alright, so obviously the light rays look a bit more prominent here, so what you could do, where are the light rays? There and there. Push that up a bit. If you don't want these light rays to be affected by this mask, just take that outside of the folder, so now the light rays sort of pass through. I'm just going to sharpen everything. Vivid light. High pass. Alright. Okay. I'll put that in here. Let's compare that against the original. So, oops, I'll put this in here as well. Alright. So there's the original. And there's the result. So guys, that's it. I hope it gives you a really good understanding of some creative ways that you could use this action. And it gives you an idea of what all the layers do and how to make some customizations. I'll put a link down to my help page below, so if you run into any troubles, check out that page first and send me an email and I'll help you out. I'll also put a link down to a few other actions that I think you might like. I've got over 100 and they're a lot of fun to play around with. You can mix them together, create all sorts of different effects. Okay. So guys, yeah, that's it. I hope you have fun using the effect. Thanks.